So this is pretty funny, actually, because the majority of the exercises I have prepared today are actually taken from the exact same game. So that's pretty interesting, but it's a very interesting game, so we're going to be looking here. All right, so I minimized again. Okay, so in this position, we're going to be looking at a game where I was playing black against the Bryce Tiglon. It was from Washington, which is where the game was played in, I believe, right at the end of 2019, so just a couple of months before COVID. So it's black to play here, and so we can immediately notice that the king on h3 is under extreme pressure. At the same time, it's not so easy to proceed as black as well. So how can we continue here? Yes, you there.
Rook f8?
Yeah, so Rook f8 is a pretty natural move to bring in the rook into the game. So after Rook f8, what do you believe that white is going to play?
Probably the rook on a1 to f1 to trade off an attacking piece.
Yeah, very good so far. Yeah, so you and so Devanshi in the audience and SDSVR are correct so far that after Rook f8, white would probably play Rook a to f1. So after Rook a to f1, what do you think about black's position? Are we doing well, or what's going on?
What I just didn't realize that I realize now is that we're down 2 pieces for a pawn.
Yes, that is correct. So you have to be pretty careful, otherwise you're just going to lose because we're down 2 pieces. Queen e5 looks stronger. I need to lift my rook through f6 to h6. So yeah, the problem is that if you play a move like queen e5, white's still going to play rook f1, and you're just not going to be able to hold on to your attacking position for that much longer. Yeah, so rook f1 and a pair of rooks would come off, and from there the attack is going to be relatively weak, sadly. For the record, I did not make the right choice in this game. Then h5, a more direct approach. Yes, h5 is very direct. h5 is actually what I played in the game. So the good news is that you're thinking like me, who was an IM at this point. Unfortunately, the bad news for you, Pastor, is that thinking like me in this case was the wrong case, because h5 is actually losing straight away, which actually leads us right into our next example. But before that, let's go on to SDSVR's suggestion here, where after rook f8, rook f1, he mentions a check on h6, which is difficult to calculate. All right, so after rook f8, rook f1, queen h6, what do you see there, SDSVR? Pastor says that it's a perpetual, and he is correct, although perhaps the details of it are a little fuzzier than would be expected. But after rook f8, so in this position, white is more or less forced to play rook f1. So like, for example, if white just makes some nothing move like bishop c6, black is already able to play rook f2, and on some queen move, there is queen h6 with rook f4 checkmate coming up. So yeah, white is forced to play rook f1 in order to prevent rook f2 from happening. But in this case, black is able to make a perpetual here with queen g5, king h2, queen h4, king g2, queen g4. So Arikido is correct so far. Okay, not exactly. So the problem with your line there, Arikido, so Arikido suggested queen h5 and then queen g4. But the problem is after rook takes f3, rook takes f3. I believe in this position, white is able to play king h1. And since the white queen swings over to h2, you're going to have to take the knight. But this position is losing, given that we are down a piece here. So yeah, the correct line is still the one that was mentioned by SDSVR and judged by Pastor. But in this position, white is able to swing the queen to h2. However, after queen takes e4, definitely a very peculiar perpetual check, but it does indeed still happen. If white wishes to play rook f3 first, then I believe white's actually in serious danger of losing after rook takes f3, since rook h3 will probably pick up a queen here. Yeah. So the key reason, or sorry, okay, perhaps queen takes f3 is actually better, since we still seem to have the same sort of perpetual. Anyway, what was I saying? So the key to this position is realizing that as black, the objective is actually to draw, since the key is that you have to understand black is losing in other cases. So that is why this position is difficult to do. Since, yeah, if black does not go for this perpetual check, it is in fact losing, as we are about to see in the case of what happens after h5, since it is now white to move. And so how should white address this situation?
Probably playing rook a1 right away.
So, Devanshi, what do you think that, what is it that you think that, that black wants to play on the next move?
Well, since its objective is to draw rook f8 on the 8th rank.
Your audience sound quite young. Are they able to solve these puzzles? Well, the audience is quite young, but that does not mean that they are necessarily weak. Yeah, h5 creates a much more serious threat. So in this position, black is threatening to win right away by playing queen g4. Like for example, a move like rook f1 would allow queen g4, and the knight on g3 is going to be hanging after a while, and rook takes g3 will win the game. So it's very important for white to make a move that somehow protects this knight, or otherwise against this threat of queen g4 to h4. Oh, yes, yes, of course. U.S. Masters are among the youngest, behind countries like India. Yeah, something like that. SD, SVR suggests Queen H2. Yeah, so the most pertinent candidate moves that are available to white are going to be Queen G2 and Queen H2, since those are pretty much the only moves white can play to avoid this Queen G4, Queen H4 threat, as they allow white to protect knight on G3. So the key is to make the choice between these two moves.
I think Queen G2 is better.
Okay. Queen G2 was what white chose in the game. Let's see if we can get a couple of more answers here from the people in Twitch chat before going through some lines. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty even split here with Pastor favoring Queen H2 and SDSVR favoring Queen G2. So yeah, as expected, it's a fairly tough position to understand. So Queen G2, as was chosen by my international master opponent, is actually the wrong move. So Queen H2 is superior because of some very powerful counterplay along the H file. So for example, in the case of the move H4, after white can simply play rook AF1, so after H takes G3. So in this position, it's actually quite possible for black to win the exchange on F1. But after bishop takes c6 and e takes d5, black is not going to be able to stop these three connected pawns and leaving white with a winning position. So, so after queen h2, black is pretty much forced to play the move rook af8 in order to avoid this line. And then after rook f1, so of course black does not want to be exchanging pieces. So yeah, the big problem for black is that if you take an f1, white is not going to take an f1 with a rook, which would potentially allow a checkmate on g4. White would take with the knight on f1, and all of the key squares appear to be protected, so white would be left with a winning position here. So then the key is what happens on the move rook 8 to f4 with the threat of rook h4 coming up. And if white takes an f3, then there's queen g4 with queen takes f3, and in fact white would lose here again. So this is the subject of our next exercise. Or perhaps it's not actually. What is wrong with me? Okay, I think I originally intended it to be that way. But after rook 8 to f4, yeah, because the queen is present on h2, there's a possibility for white to retreat to g2 straight away with king g2. And yeah, white should end up with a winning position here. So yeah, anyway, so this did not happen in the game as queen g2 was chosen. So a few moves down the line, we reached this position wherein I had succeeded in trading one of my rooks for the white queen after some time of pretty much normal moves. So in this position, it is black to move and find the best way to proceed. Yeah, a lot of subs today. Pretty good. Yes, I should flip the board. Personally, I never really cared too much about people flipping the board or not, but a lot of students and such tell me it matters. Followers ain't no subs. Indeed, that is correct.
So maybe H4?
Yeah, H4 is definitely possible. H4 is, believe it or not, what I played in the game, and happens to be really bad. It's very tempting though, so I understand why you would say it, since a lot of white's normal moves in that position are losing, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in shortly. Yeah, so I guess we can just do that right now. So after H4, so white can move the knight to several different places, but the most desirable ones, like 94, would allow rook takes f3 and picking up the rook on g1 to achieve a material advantage. So white is forced to play 92, and at first it looks like white is facing a serious problem after queen f5. But this is in fact the subject of the next exercise, so we'll be getting there momentarily. For the meantime, in the meantime, we're going to be looking at this position right here. So a couple of suggestions here. So Pastor suggests rook takes f3, but after rook takes f3, so it would be possible to play queen g4 and perhaps try picking up the knight on g3 through playing h4, but this is not really sufficient for black. If anything, for white is already possible to play rook e1 and simply advance the e-pawn with a most likely winning position for white. So yeah, again, that is not quite there, but yeah, fairly close. Rook h4 and queen d2, suggested by Dr. Drink and Drive. Good to see you again. Yeah, but in this position, white has several defenses. Simply 92 already appears to be good enough, or even bishop e2. Also, I don't see anything. Is there anything particularly wrong with rook f2? Perhaps not, but I'm sure that white should just favor 92, which just looks a little bit safer. Yeah, so this is a really weird position. So the key to understanding this position is pretty much just knowing that if black is able to capture the e5 pawn, then the exposed king for white should lead to very good counterplay. But the problem is if you take an e5 right away, then you're very liable to drop the h-pawn, which would not be ideal for black, since white is a material here with a rook and two pieces versus a queen and a pawn. Potentially there can be two pawns, but yeah, it's not optimal here. And yeah, Dr. Drink and Drive has the correct idea. The best move in this position for black is g6. So after g6, it turns out that pretty much no matter what white plays, there is no reasonable way to protect the e5 pawn. And indeed, after e6, something like queen e7 is perfectly fine. And in this position, black has quite a serious advantage as the white queenside pawns are very weak and the white king is unlikely to find any form of safety in the near future. So yeah, very difficult position to understand, but yeah, g6 is the best move here. And it turns out that just by playing solidly, black is able to pick up that e-pawn and achieve a great advantage. So the next exercise we're going to be looking at begins in this position after queen f5 check. So in this case, it is white to move again. And how should white address the problems in this position? The exception of the rule of queen superiority case over three pieces? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the problem there for white is that the king is really bad and the queenside pawns are unlikely to survive for too long. So that's why it ends up being good for black.
Bishop g4 attacking the queen and rook at the same time?
Right, so bishop g4 is definitely a strong move to consider. Of course, then it's also important to consider what white is going to play against that. So yeah, please. Yes, what black is going to play against that. So yeah, please take a second to do so. Nice. Yeah, very nicely done from Dr. Drink and Drive. So if white wishes to try to retreat the king and protect the bishop, then after rook c4, again, there's a problem for white in which black is going to pick up the e5 pawn, likely the c5 pawn and possibly the b2 pawn. So in this position, black should have some small advantage. In any case, the position is very practically difficult to play for white since the king remains very exposed. So after bishop g4, queen d3, at first it looks like this is going to be pretty good for black, since in the case of king takes h4, black is able to abuse the pin on the fourth rank and meet rook takes f4 with queen h2, picking up one of the rooks with a massive fork here. This is actually what happened in the game, as it turns out that even though the rook on g1 is going to fall, the black king is very weak and the e-pawn is very strong, which should allow white to make a draw somehow. But Dr. Drink and Drive points out the best move here, rook g3. So after rook g3, the threat to the queen makes it so that black does not have time to capture on f1, and after h takes g3, rook takes f4, white just has a huge material advantage here, and combined with that super powerful e6 pawn and the now safe white king, as there are no more pieces to combine with the queen, white would be left with a seriously winning advantage here. So very nicely done. Yeah, so that is the correct way for white to play in this position. And instead, we're going to be rerouted to this position, which occurred much later on in the game. So, yeah, but as you can see, this pretty clearly came from the position after king g5 and queen takes g1. And then, in fact, king g6 was played, and I played queen b1 check. So after king g6, queen b1 check, we're going to be looking at what should white play here. Bishop f5 is very natural and indeed happened in the game, but not a terribly good move, unfortunately. Mostly because white has a really powerful idea here, which is very easy to underestimate. That is indeed what happened in the game.
King f7 supporting pawn.
Well, you only have a couple of legal moves, so at this point it seems like a process of elimination. But yes, king f7 is the best move. Since after king f7, it turns out that if black wishes to play normally with a move like queen takes b2, there's actually a very serious danger of being checkmated straight away on the h-file, which is very difficult for black to actually address. After king f7, black should be forced to play queen h7, but now the white king is able to run to the queen side and leave white with some advantage after capturing the c6 pawn and advancing the e-pawn. Yes?
So what if black just took the a2 pawn with a check?
So you take the a2 pawn with check, that's a great question, but again, white simply needs to move the bishop away so that now the queen is under attack and rook h4 mate remains a possibility. So in the game, bishop f5 happened, and I still severely underestimated this idea of king f7, so I actually took on b2, and what should have happened in the game was king f7, and pretty sure I have to resign pretty soon. Yeah, I'm not able to cover h3.
Actually, king f7, don't we just lose the e5 pawn?
Excuse me?
King f7, queen takes e5.
Well, isn't white threatening checkmate in one?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so I actually took on b2, but it turns out that this move is not that great because black is able to bring the queen to h1 and create a defense on the h-file by playing g5. And yeah, black is going to bring the queen back to h6 and g7, and a draw should be possible here. So that is why king f7 first is a better implementation of the idea. Believe it or not, I actually did end up winning this game, even though this happened in the game. My opponent did not find king f7, and somehow I managed to win despite my best efforts. So yeah, I mean, really feels like I tried as hard as possible to lose this game, but somehow managed to win in the end. So just another example of how chaotic chess can be. Okay, so yeah, just as a bit of a reprieve from that exercise, let's do an easier one for now. This game was played in the 2019 World Open, so I was playing black against a player from Canada, around 2200, 2250 FIDE, something like this. So yeah, simply we have black to move in this position. Obviously, there's a protected pass pawn on b2, which is very strong, but at the same time, white does have a pretty annoying skewer that is ready for black in this position. So how should we continue as black to get out of this problem? So chess lovers suggest bishop d6, which is definitely a possibility. Bishop d6 is very tempting because if white takes on d6, you're able to eliminate the rook and play an in-between move of b1 queen. Sadly, white can use their own in-between move to capture the rook and take on d6, which should leave white with a pretty good position there. But yeah, pretty good idea. But there's something a lot more powerful for black available in this position. Yeah, drink and drive gets it again. So the funny thing here is that the white rook on d1 is actually temporarily overloaded, as it is forced to protect b1 and the white queen. So you could think of it by thinking about it like how pretty much you could consider the white queen to be hanging at the moment. So by playing queen b7, so first of all, on queen takes b7, rook takes b7, black has escaped the loss of material, and so yeah, black is up with this really powerful pawn on b2 and should win the game fairly smoothly. And after bishop takes b8, again, because this rook is overloaded, it is not capable of covering both of these squares, so a simple promotion is possible. And rook takes b1, queen takes d5 is of course not an option for black, and the queens happen to protect each other. Unfortunately, I do not get to keep the pair of queens for very long, since after rook takes e7, I run into a sort of back rank problem. Queen e7, rook b1 is obviously not a possibility, and rook e7 allows queen d8.
We can do queen takes d1.
Mm-hmm.
And after queen takes, we just take on e7 with the queen and rid off the exchange.
Yeah, very good. That's exactly what happened. After queen takes d1, and queen takes e7, black has an extra exchange here. And perhaps even more importantly, white is faced with a situation where, because the b8 bishop is hanging, white is not able to prevent the exchange of queens on e1, and therefore leaving black with a completely winning endgame, since just for a good measure, even the c2 pawn is not salvageable, and white ended up resigning here. All right, so let's move on to the next example. Great job to everyone involved who ended up finding that. So in this case, we have black to move. Black indeed did just capture a rook on d1. Oh wait, it appears that someone has a question about the previous example. Queen b3. Where would queen b3 have been possible? Where would that have been possible, SDSVR?
Queen b3 there. I think queen b3, queen b7, queen b3.
I mean, it's obviously possible, but I mean, you would just simply take the queen and move away with a again, black has the protected pass pawn on b2, and should be pretty much winning for black here, since that pawn on b2 is not going to be stoppable at the end of the day. But yeah, you're right. It would be a better try for white than what happened in the game, which is pretty immediately losing. But at the end of the day, everything should be losing for white. Anyway, so yeah, in this example, my friend I am Craig Hilby is playing white, and Grandmaster Brandon Jacobson is playing black. So in the game, black somehow played like knight f2 and took on d1, and white has decided to meet this with knight d5, creating a sort of in-between move, also forking the queen and rook. So the task here is to find what black should do about this. Rook c3. So rook c3 is a very interesting possibility. So on rook c3, I believe white takes the queen on b6. And so if you take the queen on b3, white simply recaptures, and this is possible, but at the end of the day, black's advantage here, if it exists at all, is very small. The knight is going to migrate over to c4, and it's doubtful that you have a great advantage here, but definitely possible. A simple move like queen a5 or something, after take c7, you would probably take on c7, and yeah, most likely you'd have a pretty similar pawn structure to that. So yeah, not a bad move, but there is slightly better here. Indeed, it is black to move, chess lover. Yeah, no worries.
So is white also GM?
White was an IM in this game. Looking at queen, chess lover says looking at queen a5. Yeah, definitely an important move to consider, that's for sure. Whoa, Pastor suggests move bishop a4, but I think black is able to, I think white's able to take the bishop on a4 there. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work out too well for black there, but clever idea. So yeah, it looks like,
Knight c3.
yeah, Julian's right there. So after knight c3, the key is that in this position after pawn takes c3, rook takes c3, you will end up in a very similar situation to the initial move rook c3, but indeed the white b pawn is missing from b2. So of course it's just a version with an extra pawn. If white wishes to take on b6, you would just simply capture the queen and take on b6, and black has an extra pawn here and should be a decent bit better in this endgame. And the same applies for knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. White's not able to recapture any of these pawns on account of that pinned queen. So SDS VR there has bishop a4, but yeah, unfortunately, in this position, White can simply return the queen to b3.
Or just take the queen on b6.
Oh, you're right, actually. The queen on b6 is hanging. Yeah, very good. Yeah, so that actually, so that's actually really bad, bishop a4, unfortunately. So yeah, definitely not an optimal situation there. Yeah, so in the game, Black actually played queen a5, and if I'm not mistaken, yeah, White played knight takes c7, and White actually had some advantage here, but later in the game, White ended up messing up, and they ended up, Black actually ended up winning the game in a pretty interesting endgame. I recommend investigating the game to anyone who wishes to play this pawn structure, since Black handled the deep endgame extremely well. Okay, so the last set of examples, just like the first set of examples, are all taken from the same game. So in this game, I was playing Black against a roughly 2200-ish FIDE player. And so basically what had happened was that I had played some preparation against the f3 Nimzo Indian, evolving a quick d5 and meeting a3 with bishop d6, which I was introduced to by someone in this room. And so basically, I developed an initiative very early, and we culminated in this position when White was finally afforded the opportunity to castle short. So here we have Black to move and how to increase the pressure.
Is it okay if we can flip the board, please?
Oh yes, that would be a good idea. The queen has to defend d2. Drink and Drive is absolutely correct about that. The white queen is forced to hold the d2 rook.
Rook takes e2 is just an equal trade, right?
Yeah. I mean, that wouldn't be very impactful. White would play queen takes d2, follow up with knight c3. And perhaps Black is a little bit better, since Black does have control of the opened files and the superior minor piece, but nothing too serious there.
Maybe we can play b6.
So b6 is definitely a strong consideration here.
Because the queen has to stay on the diagonal. Protecting
Does the queen have to stay on the diagonal?
because it has to protect the rook on the side.
Yeah, but you also have to look at rook takes d8, right?
Yeah, Julian is right about that. So the immediate b6, which would be a very nice move to play. Queen b4 would lose to a pretty funny sequence, assuming nothing is possible, since the queen eventually has to go with the d2 square. But White can simply capture on d8, and if you take the queen, rook takes e8 should actually leave White with the better position now with the two rooks against the queen. So you would most likely be forced to take on d8 with your rook, and now White can do virtually anything.
Even
Perhaps
so.
queen b4 is fine. Again, Black is probably better here with the more active pieces and the bishop against the knight, but nothing too serious. There is something a lot more devastating that Black has available here. Pastor says, I think I'm penetrating second rank after queen b6, and then corrects himself, and indeed, Pastor is correct the second time around. Chess Super Bowl edition, yes. Yeah, I was actually asking earlier if anyone was watching this stream and the Super Bowl concurrently, but I don't think anyone is doing that. Oh, wow. Okay, so we do have someone who's doing that in chat. Yes, sorry to interrupt you.
So rook d3 looks pretty strong to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
The intention of playing b6 again and rook takes d3 is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Rook d1, rook e2 should be good enough.
Okay.
That's queen b5. No, queen b5, rook d2 should be good enough, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, rook d3 is a very interesting idea. So rook d3 is nice because in the case of rook takes d3, bishop takes d3, the pin on the knight makes it so that white is going to be losing material here, and the rook has been removed from the sensitive d8 square, and therefore both b6 and rook e5 would be acceptable ways of removing the queen from the rook. So black does create a threat by playing rook d3. And so there are a couple of moves that white can play here. If white so wishes to avoid, if white so wishes, then white can try to remove the knight from e2. But this, of course, allows black to execute the threat with rook e5, a5, and then g5, forcing the queen to let go of the rook on d2. And unfortunately for white, there are too many hanging pieces here, and queen e3 makes it so that white cannot address all of them at the same time. So knight c1, which is very tempting, is not sufficient for white to survive. And queen a4 is another interesting try, because white is able to release the queen from this b6 threat, as well as create some pressure on e8. Does Julian have, or anybody else, have a better suggestion, have a continuation here available?
My intention was just to take d2 and claim that e2 and b2 are hanging, and I was happy to just win a pawn. But maybe
Yeah, I mean that's pretty valid. I mean, to be honest, that's already pretty good. To be honest, but yeah, it is stronger. There is some slightly stronger continuation here. It looks very odd, but by starting with queen b6, you're forcing the king to make its own back rank issue. And now after queen d8, rook takes d3, bishop takes d3, the pin remains as strong as ever. And rook fd1, rook takes e2 is pretty sad for white on account of all of these pins. So after rook d3, which turns out to be the correct move, white in the game played rook fd1, and that leads us to our next exercise, believe it or not. Okay, so in this position, so now we have this position with black to move. So I should start off by mentioning that rook takes e2 here, as suggested by Julian earlier, is definitely a strong move candidate, but it's important to think about how white can possibly defend after that, and if there may be something better in the starting position. Drinking Drive suggests queen g5, but I think the pin along the 5th rank is very annoying, and indeed after rook takes d3, yeah, this doesn't seem to work out, since on rook takes e2, which I assume was probably the idea, white can force a queen trade with queen d8. Remember, the king on g8 is very vulnerable, and in fact black would actually probably lose the game here. And of course bishop takes d3, queen takes g5 is nothing particularly special for black, so yeah, unfortunate. Yeah, queen d8 is the key idea there for white.
I'm not even remotely close to finding a defense for white.
Wait, oh, sorry, what did you say?
I don't see any defense for white after rook e2.
Okay, I mean, okay, so this is not a great puzzle in the sense that like after rook e2, black is also winning, but it's not like immediate. If that makes any sense, like you can reach a line where you're like up a pawn with a great position, but there's no like immediate win in that position. Whereas there is a move here that like ends the game immediately, but it's really difficult. Honestly, I'm not expecting too much from the audience or the chat here. Not because you guys are bad, but just because it's really hard. I mean, when I was preparing this exercise just this afternoon, this was something that I also didn't understand for a little while. So yeah. So Drink and Drive suggests rook e5. So after rook e5, let's say perhaps. So here there's actually a lot of different moves to consider, which is a little bit bizarre. But probably the most pertinent of them is simply queen c7, after which it's not so obvious how this is different from the game situation. So
Does queen takes b2 work?
here,
Yeah.
do you think that it works?
Not really sure.
So what happens if white takes her queen?
Rook takes d1, followed by the 8th rank rook to e1.
Wait, hold on. So you want to play queen takes b2 and then rook takes d1?
Yeah.
So white has like white has two legal moves, but one potential move, king of 2. I think we're probably down to queen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look too hot. Oh, thank you so much for the raid, Akash. Is rook takes f3 just absolute insanity? Well, it depends on how you define insanity, but for me, taking a winning position and dropping a whole rook is pretty rough. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work out too well. Yeah, Pastor gave the sample line of queen g5 and then queen e3, but white has a bunch of ways to defend. I think rook f2 is probably just the simplest with an extra rook for white. Okay, so yeah, the problem for black here is that the move rook takes e2 is very tempting since white is not able to take on e2 on account of the fact that the d1 rook would be hanging in that case. And indeed, this is what I played in the game because I didn't understand the solution. But after rook takes d3, bishop takes d3, rook takes d3. Queen g6 looks like it's winning as we are creating a double attack on the rook and queen takes g2 checkmate. But after queen d8, king h7, white is able to prevent the entry of the black queen with the move g4. And obviously this is not good for white. After rook takes b2, I mean, black is up a pawn, white king is exposed. Position's probably around -3 or so. But at the same time, you know, like there's a little bit of chess left to be played, and there is no immediate win here. In the game, white completely lost his marbles and played g3 here, which allows queen h5, and the queen simply infiltrates to c2, and I delivered checkmate very shortly. So the key here is in fact the move rook e5. So after rook e5, white has a couple of options, but almost all of them are almost impossible to refute in advance in a real game. In the case of the move queen a4, which looks very natural since the queen is no longer needed to protect d2 and can instead shore up d1, preventing rook takes e2. Black simply plays rook takes e2 anyway and meets rook takes e2 with this gorgeous in-between move queen c6. So the queen is not able to escape this attack as the rook on d1 is needed to be covered. And of course the rook goes with check, meaning that black is going to be left with an extra bishop here. And on a move like queen takes a7, white has moved the queen off of the 5th rank. So the insertion of rook e5 means that queen g5 here is going to be winning since g4 now allows simply queen h4, and the queen should be able to enter into e1. Perhaps other moves are fine as well. Perhaps queen c1 is a little bit easier. Yeah, but queen g5 has a double attack on g2 and c1, so yeah. Yeah, my bad, PO crew. Yeah, in my notes I just have queen g5 with a winning symbol, so yeah. And no, I did not find this in game. In the game I played rook takes e2. But anyway, so yeah, the key here lies after queen c7 and after rook takes e2. So it appears that not much has changed, since on queen g6 we have the same case with queen d8 and then g4. So this is exactly the same position. So it looks like not too much has changed. And in the case of queen g5, white has the move queen d8. So, and at first it looks like any other attacking move like queen h4 or queen b2 still seems to allow some sort of queen c8, queen f5 check. In fact, I believe this would actually be losing for black after queen f5, which is kind of funny. But so this position is the subject of the next exercise, which is the last one. And so we'll be doing this one here. Where did you learn to play like this? Is there insane type? No, I did not see rook e5 in the game, unfortunately. Yeah, I did not find rook e5. In the game I played rook takes e2, as I pointed out before. And yeah, and I was pretty prepared to just try to just slowly win the position after g4, rook takes b2. But white played g3 and allowed the infiltration of the black queen into the second rank with a quick win. Anyway, so yes, we are here, and this is our final exercise for today, and probably the stupidest of all of them. So yeah, it is now black to move and find the best way to immediately win the game.
Queen g6.
Well, as we mentioned before, queen g6, it's the same position as before after queen d8 and then g4, where, again, we can take in b2, but the game is not immediately over. The problem is that the queen on d8 controls all these important squares here, so queen g5 and such is not possible. But there is something a little bit, or I shouldn't say a little bit, but there is something much stronger that is available in this position. So SDSVR suggests rook takes g2, which is also possible and definitely something I considered in the game, or with the analogous position with the queen on a5. So you would be able to pick up the rook on d3, but you're definitely, or I should say, you're pretty much definitely not going to win the game. You can, of course, give a perpetual check whenever you want, but white is not even down material here, so it's very doubtful we can do a whole lot here. And Pastor has succeeded again in refuting his own suggestion with queen g5, queen d8 check. Forcing a trade of queens there. I'm tired. Yeah, I get it. It's been a while. Yeah, Gypsy 999 also has encountered the same problem with queen h4, queen d8 check. Yeah, at the end of the day, white is winning after most of the. Sorry, black is winning after a lot of the normal moves. But the problem is that, again, white always gets counterplay with some sort of queen d8 or queen c8.
Can we go rook e1 check and king f2, queen h4?
Well, I mean, you can, but the problem is your rook is hanging. So after g3, you... Okay, well, I guess you actually don't lose because you can play queen e7, but you're very close to losing. And, yeah.
So instead of rook e1,
Mm-hmm.
all the problems are queen d8 check.
Yes.
So what if I play the move king h7?
Yeah, you and Dr. Drink and Drive have the same idea, which is the correct move, king h7. And it turns out that white doesn't have any defense to the double threats of queen takes b2 and queen h4 simultaneously, both of which would create devastating threats. And yeah, so queen g5 is a threat, queen b2 is a threat, queen h4 is a threat. And at the end of the day, white is not able to save it. So for example, if white wants to, again, reinstate this sort of queen f5 checkmate, queen f5 threat with a perpetual check. Now after queen g6, queen d8 is no longer check, so the double attack on the rook and pawn is decisive. And so yeah, king h7 is the winning move here. Hopefully I can be excused for not seeing that from this position. Rook e5 is the best because black wins with king h7 here. So yeah, so yeah, hopefully that's an excusable miss. Yeah, so good session today. I think that the examples today were of pretty high quality and high difficulty, which is good. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.